What's up, YouTube? Welcome to the Counting Wisdom podcast. I wanted to talk about my personal struggle with sin. I've talked about this before on different channels. On different, episodes. But what I've noticed is that, I can still struggle with sin even when, I have some time, apart from maybe sinning like weeks or so where maybe I haven't done that sin in a while. I know reflecting on when I first became a Christian, I've been kind of in the Christian world, for a long time, but I know there's been a time where, I didn't necessarily read my Bible, at least as much as, I can now. Of course, there's times where, I still need to read more. But also, there was times in my life, especially when I was younger, where I was completely oblivious to, things that God wanted me to do, God's will. And so, I think that, what I have noticed, though, is a greater progression of time between the moments where I'm struggling with, a particular sin, greater time in, figuring out what is causing me to sin, greater moments of rest where I'm not, completely engulfed in sin as I was maybe when I was in my college years. I know in college, or I think there's in my world, college has been a long journey, but I know there's been times where in my life where it was like an everyday thing where, maybe I'm going to smoke weed, or, I'm going to, get alcohol. And, it's a everyday thing where, my mind is wrapped around doing those things. And I know at one point in my life, I wasn't even thinking about, getting a job, or, what I guess a lot of us would call like settling down and, trying to, kind of build a life, I guess. I think I was doing that. But at the same time, I struggled focusing, especially I know a lot of us have gone through that, drug or alcohol related life. And so, it can be a struggle, but I think what I've noticed on the most recent time that I've struggled with sin is that, I think more and more it's becoming more of choosing to sin or do something that I know could lead up to sin. And, I think one thing is I need to really get a hold of, not choosing to sin, or doing things that could lead up to sin. And I think what I noticed about my particular mindset, is that there's times where you can sort of sin accidentally, where you are doing something, I call it accident, but more along the lines of you just don't necessarily know it's wrong, and it really kind of depends on what we're talking about. For example, there could be something along the lines of, masturbation. You don't know maybe when you first start doing it that it is a sin, especially as clear as, you would know it when someone explains it to you. But you don't really know it, at least, for some of us, certain things, seem more obvious than others, and some things are less obvious. But, I've noticed that now that I have more of a knowledge about, what is right and what is wrong, I think that definitely helps, for sure. I think I'm definitely stronger than, my 20-year-old self, for sure. But the crazy part is, it's still a struggle even when you know something is wrong, and it really depends on what it is, but some things can still be a struggle, and that, I think that is one of the crazy parts about, different things that are sinful, is that, some of the times when I talk about sin, I talk about it from the standpoint of, hey, don't fall into sin or resist those things that are tempting to you. But, what I've found that I can struggle with now that I think I'm a little bit more mature than, 20-year-old's been, is that, some of the things that I know is wrong, I can still be tempted to do it, even though I have more of a knowledge that it is wrong. And so, obviously, I do believe Jesus gives us freedom, but, I think when, talking about different sins and what pastors say, most pastors will say, hey, sin is, a normal part about, our life and, the Christian life. And so we just had to work through it and get stronger. And, I don't always agree with that. But at the same time, one of the things that I've said is, I'm going to just see, what power I'm able to get from God and what is really doable in the Christian life. Now, if I don't necessarily reach a goal that I have in regards to, walking free from sin, I'm sure that doesn't necessarily mean it's the standard for everybody. But what I have tried to, what I think I've heard the best, kind of advice is, your goal should be to never sin again. That should be your goal. And I think that's, what I try to push on my channel, is having that goal of, hey, you shouldn't sin again and different things like that. But what I've noticed is that it can be actually challenging to, reach that goal, because, I think one of the things that we're having to overcome is, one, the maybe pleasurable things that we can find that are sinful, but also, just the desire to do something, wrong. Now, I've also noticed that for me, I know one of my recent struggles, I think I've been overcome with emotion. I think I've been also feeling a little bit heartbreak and despair, which I think added to my sin struggle. And I don't know if I've always noticed that in the beginning of my life, where, I'm sinning in some way, and it's from the standpoint of, hey, I'm just trying to feel better or, relieve my suffering in some way. But I think when I first, started to, do different things, it was more from the standpoint of, kind of having a good time, not necessarily with the full-on thought of, oh, I need to relieve my suffering. I'm sure that was probably there, but it wasn't necessarily like a thought in my mind of like, I'm trying to do something, fix something in some way. But, I noticed that at least one of the most recent times is, that particular issue is, kind of trying to fix how I feel. Which leads me up to another point that I wanted to share, is that the days or weeks or months, that I may not have noticed myself struggling with the same sins and can be, in my own mind, successful in fighting against sin. What I've still noticed, though, is the knowledge of good and evil, or the knowledge of sin, is still a struggle. Like our thoughts. It's like, even if I'm not, drinking alcohol, or, getting on a bad website, or, whatever it may be, I can find that, even when we are sort of, walking in freedom, I think one of the other struggles is our thought life. And then the last thing I want to talk about is the spiritual warfare side of it. But, I want to get to that in a little bit. But our thought life, and so it can be a struggle to, not necessarily think about sinful things, or not think about the sins of others, or just being overwhelmed with, thinking about the messed up things that people are doing, or you see something in the news and, you're like kind of overwhelmed with, those thoughts of like, wow, this messed up thing is going on in this side of the country or this area, which I think can lead someone to sin for sure. But also, I think the spiritual side of it is, the whole struggle between good and evil. I think that, when we are walking in freedom, we have our enemy. Satan is trying to destroy us, kill, steal, and destroy us. And so I think, you have some points where you enter into the time of Job. I bring up Job every now and again. And I think one thing that we have to guard against is, after we have, found a victory, maybe we haven't smoked weed in years, or you haven't drank alcohol, or you haven't looked at pornography. And so now you're walking strong. And you think, oh, okay, hey, the next thing on my list is heaven. Well, I think, you enter into a time of testing that I don't think all of us are really always prepared for, where now Satan is attacking us. And it's similar to the story of Job, where Job, he was a blameless man. Now, the Bible obviously describes all people as sinners. So we can assume that at some point in Job's life, he did sin. And it's most likely not later on in his life. It's most likely talking about, we know, people sin from early on. But at some point, Job, walked with God and turned away from sin. And so God, said about Job that he was a blameless man and righteous man. But yet we know the story of Job is filled with a whole bunch of disaster and tragedy that I think, one of the tests that Job, clearly was facing was that, Satan was like, hey, he's going to sin, he's going to sin, if he faces this and he faces that, he's going to sin. And then God was like, no, Job is not going to sin. He's turned from his sins. Basically, he's walking with God, and, he's blameless and upright man. And so I think that's one of the things that we can sort of struggle with in regards to our struggle with sin. And my struggle with sin is, what I've noticed is that, not that I'm on the level of Job or something like that, but that on those, days or months or, times that, I'm successful, I have different things that can sort of test me, where it's like maybe, I'm low on cash, or, maybe I'm, trying to move ahead and, get a better job, or maybe it's my health, or, maybe it's, a marriage issue, maybe it's a kids issue, maybe it's a struggle between, my parents and I, or, my brother. It can be anything. And so it's like when things are going good and you've already overcome a certain sin, then you have these little issues that can sort of, poke at you. And then you start to contemplate, okay, maybe I do need to, do this one sin, or whatever it may be, because, now I'm struggling, now I'm suffering, and, wow, I, need to overcome this in some way. And obviously, the Bible definitely speaks to that time of, how we need to endure. I know Paul told Timothy to patiently endure evil. And so the Bible definitely has, God definitely tells us his will in regards to trouble and suffering. But I know for me, it can be hard, where you're like, oh man, if I just drink this alcohol, I can feel a little bit better. And I liked how this guy, I'm listening to this alcohol book, and he was saying something a little bit similar to that. He was saying how, it's not just, when you're trying to live a sober life, sometimes you can feel like, oh man, if I drink alcohol, it will relieve my anxiety, relieve the anxiety that I have. And he was saying how, he struggled with, that type of thing too. And so I think, for many sins, I think it can be that same struggle for us in this world, is that, especially when we're having a hard day, we're like, I don't know, it may be something for you. Maybe it is going to a bar, or, maybe if you're having a struggle in your marriage, you're like, oh, I'm going to hit up this other person, and try to hook up with them, just so I can get some relief and not have the pressure in my marriage. I'm going to, hook up with this other person because, there's no strings attached type of deal. And, I don't have to suffer through my issues in my marriage. It could be something else. Obviously it can't, list all the sins. If you're struggling with, marijuana, maybe you have some sort of pressure in life and you're like, I'm just going to, blaze up and, watch a movie, or, relax and just sit down and blaze this joint. And so whatever it may be, I think that one of the things that I'm realizing is that, how hard it was for Job to not sin and what he went through. And I don't think God is, he's not going to be okay with us sinning, just to get relief. And so, I think these are all different struggles that, I just wanted to document. Now, the Bible says that, it is good for us to be strengthened by grace, or, to be preached to in a grace type of style. And so, I definitely think that, if I were to die today, I would not go to hell. And definitely, obviously, it's better to think that, and then just thinking like, oh, I'm going to hell, But at the same time, I think we still need to, resist these temptations, and also learn the different strategies that we can at least sometimes notice. Maybe it's, kind of hard to notice every single strategy that we feel like Satan is using, or, the people who, live with Satan, the things that they do, because one of the things that I was thinking of is like, you can see how Satan is involved in this world. Sometimes we don't necessarily notice it, but when you think about how, porn is free to access, and a lot of these companies like Google, they don't give you an option to block porn from your search engines, and I even looked at porn blockers on my apps, and it only works in certain web browsers. It doesn't work in all web browsers. And so there's different things that this world, is sort of, I think it's, we have to take a new strategy rather than, trying to avoid everything that is sort of tempting, and obviously it would be great maybe to, I'm just going to switch to, I don't know, like a flip phone or something, which I have done before. And I think, we really need to just continue with Jesus. And, like I said, I've noticed better victories for sure. I think I've noticed progression in how I'm handling, different tempting things and different tempting situations. But at the same time, one of the things that I've also realized too is that, even just, sort of deciding to, sin, maybe because of some sort of pressure or, thing that's going on in my life, and I'm like, hey, I just gotta, find some relief somehow from this struggle. I find that to be a little bit of a hard thing for us to deal with too. And so, it really kind of made me think also that, I don't think people go to hell because of, sort of like the environment. I know this is kind of a thing in sociology where we say, hey, God, our environment is so bad, that, how can I overcome this, type of thing? Or, I'm subject to different sufferings, how can I overcome this sin? But I don't think that's why someone goes to hell either, because it would be unfair in a way when you really think about it. And when I think about, how fair God is, and how righteous God is, that makes me come to the conclusion that, a person doesn't, go to hell because of the environment that they're in, and so that's one thing that, I obviously could be wrong about, but, I don't think someone, goes to hell because they're made to sin in some way. I do think we are charged with wrong as far as, not taking the antidote of Jesus Christ, not getting help when we know there is a problem in our life. One of the things that I've noticed is that sometimes you can have people, and I've been one of them, where, someone is pointing out that something is wrong in our life and we are not, heeding that message. And so I think that's one of the things, that the Bible clearly says is that, God charges us with wrong, when we are, doing something that, he tells us is wrong, and we're refusing to get help with it. We're refusing to, take the medicine that he's offering us. Now, one of the things that I've also noticed with following Jesus, and I'll leave this to be a conclusion, is I do sort of agree in some form or fashion that just because you pray the prayer and ask Jesus to come into your life, there's still clearly something that is happening with us in regards to sin. And I'm talking about even for me to even maybe decide to, I don't know, drink alcohol or go to that bad website or watch that, kind of raunchy video. There's still something that I think, needs to happen in regards to our walk with Christ. And when Paul said to put to death the deeds of the body, that to me implies that it's something that is sort of an ongoing thing of how we are to, continually put to death those sins that are, so easily entangling us. And I think that, it implies also that, over time we will get better and better at overcoming these particular issues. Now, obviously, I still do hold to that. I think that there are certain things that as we get more strength to overcome it, and we are able to endure different sufferings and challenges, that, I do believe God is expecting us to not continue to sin. But, I can't fully say, when exactly that time is, just because, I know that sometimes maybe I am doing something wrong, obviously, but I know for many of us out there that, it can be a struggle for a while, even if we, have sort of checked the boxes that God is asking us to do in the Bible. Clearly there's still something off about us, and I think it's because we are still in this sinful body and having the nature of the flesh in our body. And like I was saying about our mind, even when I'm not doing something sinful, there's still something that's happening in my brain that what I've noticed is it's actually beyond my control. Not that it's always, something crazy, but it's more along the lines of just having a knowledge of good and evil according to the story of the Bible. Clearly, and Romans chapter 7, talks about this too. And that, clearly, even when I'm not necessarily doing something, there is the struggle to, not think about sinful things or not have, to not have peace in some form and, struggle in some way. So anyway, hopefully this was helpful to someone. Hopefully you got something from it. I just wanted to share about how, I've seen myself struggle, and, sometimes I can sort of consider, wow, I'm doing much better than what I did years ago. But yet, I can still see that, there's some things that, are seemingly harder to break than others. And so, anyway, thanks so much, and I will talk to you on the next one. See ya.